Welcome back to What's the Plot? This is a recap of Like Mike, a 2002 American sports comedy. Spoilers ahead. It begins with a young group of friends in an orphanage playing basketball. A group of bullies storm over to them, start pushing them around, and ask to play Calvin, the main character, one-on-one for his jersey. Calvin's friends try to stop him from agreeing by saying he will beat you up, regardless if you win or lose, so it's not worth it. Calvin doesn't listen, and says he can take him. The scene then switches to Ox wearing Calvin's jersey, and everyone laughing, which shows that Ox won the game. Ox then rips the jersey apart from his chest, saying I guess they don't make these for normal-sized people. Calvin tells them to keep laughing, because they won't be laughing when he gets 5 new jerseys from the family that's going to adopt him. Ox replies saying that Calvin won't get adopted, but Calvin has high hopes that he will. The kids are all sat down watching television, but the carer, Mr. Biddleman, comes along and switches it off, and says that it's time to get to work. He takes them to a parking lot outside a basketball arena to sell some fresh candy, but everyone the kids ask, either ignores them or refuses to buy. Calvin and Murph are then watching the game on the big screen outside, and get upset when the team they support gets defeated. On their way back to the car, Calvin spots Coach Wagner, and walks over to him asking if he wants any candy, while talking about the game. Wagner seems concerned that he's out so late on a school night, and Calvin explains that he's an orphan trying to raise money for the group home. Wagner then grabs $20 from his pocket, and asks for a chocolate bar, but Calvin feels guilty, and says that he can't charge him, as he doesn't even know if the money really goes to the group home. Wagner asks his name, and then asks him if he's ever seen the Knights play in the arena. Calvin says no, and Wagner gives him some tickets for Sunday's game, as he won't take the candy money. Calvin is very grateful and excited, and runs off to tell Murph. Back at the orphanage, it is visiting day, and the house is full of hopeful foster parents. Calvin says he has a good feeling, but Ox says that none of them are getting adopted, because parents only want the younger children. Calvin gets sad as the parents start leaving, and he hasn't been chosen. He spots a lady, Sister Teresa, coming along and tries to escape, but she shouts his name, and asks where his history homework is. She pulls out a box of hand-me-down clothes, and gives Murph a winter coat from it. A pair of sneakers fall out, Calvin spots them, and sits down to try them on. They are a perfect fit. Sister Teresa says that the guy who dropped them off said they used to belong to some famous basketball player when he was a kid. Calvin then checks under the tongue of the shoe, and finds the initials MJ. He calls Murph and Reg over to have a look. They can't believe it, and to confirm it Calvin asks Sister Teresa if his name was Michael Jordan. She ignores him. Ox comes along and grabs the sneakers from him, and they both start tugging them back and forth. Ox gets a hold of them, launches them into the air, and the laces end up getting caught on a telephone wire. The evening comes, and the sneakers are still caught up there, in the pouring rain and thunder. All of the kids are fast asleep, apart from Calvin, who is wide awake staring out of the window at them. He wants them so bad, so he wakes up his friends to help him go and get them. They go out into the rain, and Murph lifts up Calvin so he can climb up the tree. He crawls across a high branch, slips, and nearly falls, but luckily finds his balance. He stands up, and reaches over for the sneakers, but as he pulls them towards him, some lightning hits the telephone wire, and throws him off the tree down to the ground. He lands on his back holding the sneakers, and notices small electric currents running through the laces. Sunday comes, and the kids turn up at the basketball arena to watch the Knights game. As they arrive, Ox is already there, and asks Calvin how he got the tickets, and says that he's going to tell Biddleman, the carer. Calvin bribes Ox by offering him some of the tickets to not rat on them. The kids get inside and begin watching the game. Halftime comes along, and the players go in the back rooms for a break. They begin a halftime show to keep the watchers occupied, and announce that one lucky fan will get the chance to go one-on-one with Tracy Reynolds, one of the Knights players. The winner is chosen at random by a lucky dip, and each person in the crowd has their own unique number on their ticket. Calvin's number gets called out, and he stands up yelling with excitement. Ox tries to grab the ticket off him, but Calvin tricks him by saying security is coming, then runs off when Ox is turning his back. Calvin introduces himself, and is starstruck while meeting Tracy Reynolds. They shake hands, Calvin grabs the microphone, and starts entertaining the crowd. Right before they begin the one-on-one, someone in the crowd shouts at Calvin to tie his shoes, and as he does this, he whispers to his sneakers, "Make me like Mike." The game begins. Calvin gets past Tracy, runs up and scores first time. The crowd starts cheering. Calvin then takes a three-pointer shot, and gets it straight in the hoop. The crowd goes even wilder, and they cannot believe it. Tracy gets embarrassed, and takes his jacket off as he is breaking a sweat. It is Calvin's turn again, but this time, he launches the ball at the backboard, flies through the air, and does a slam dunk. The whole arena goes completely silent, while Calvin is swinging from the hoop. His friends start clapping, and the whole room follows, cheering and whistling. Mr. Biddleman is sat in his car playing checkers, when Frank Bernard, the LA Knights general manager, pops up to tell him about Calvin's performance. He accidentally makes him jump, and the checkers get knocked all over the place. They go back for a meeting at the orphanage, as Frank wants to have Calvin join the Knights basketball team. He makes Mr. Biddleman an offer of $5,000 for a one-day contract. He seems concerned that they might take advantage of Calvin, but Frank adds on an extra $2,500 to ease his worries. Mr. Biddleman instantly shakes his hand and says, "Deal." Calvin and his friends come running down into the playground with excitement, and Ox peeks out from behind the building, listening to their conversation. The kids are realizing that he was playing so good yesterday because of the sneakers he is wearing, like they have some sort of power. Calvin asks Murph to hand him the basketball. He takes a long shot, and scores first try. We then see Calvin entering the arena suited and booted, and as he walks into the back rooms, the other players start making fun of Tracy, because he got beaten by a kid. Calvin apologizes about the other day, but Tracy says he just got lucky. Frank Bernard brings out Calvin's LA Knights uniform, along with a fresh pair of sneakers. Calvin gets worried, because he knows that he needs to wear his own sneakers to play good. Frank says there's no need to worry, because he just needs to look good, as he won't be playing tonight. Calvin goes to speak with Coach Wagner, to ask if this is true, and he tells him straight that he was only hired tonight just to increase attendance, and not to play. But he does say that he saw the halftime tape, and that he is honored to have him on the team. We then go into the arena. All the Knights players are on the bench, and Calvin gets introduced by the commentator as the new player. The game begins. The Knights are playing bad, and Coach Wagner calls for a timeout. The team huddles together to make a plan. Calvin pops up in the middle, and gives his input. Coach Wagner likes his idea, but Tracy doesn't, so the coach decides to make Henderson sit it out, and brings Calvin to play instead. Calvin instantly looks down at his feet, worried because he knows he will be no good playing in those sneakers. The game continues. Tracy throws Calvin the ball to take the shot, but he keeps throwing it back to Tracy because he doesn't want to embarrass himself. This happens numerous times before Calvin calls for a timeout. The referee blows his whistle, and Calvin tells Coach Wagner that he needs to go to the toilet. He runs off to the back rooms, rummaging through his stuff in search for his special sneakers. After finally finding them, he comes running back, and the crowd starts cheering. The game continues. Calvin takes a shot, and scores. The crowd goes wild. After many shots and slam dunks, Calvin ends the game with a final goal, right when the whistle blows, so the Knights win the game. He is the talk of the town, and gets spoken about right after on the news. We then see Calvin and the Knights on a plane, on their way to the next game. Coach Wagner tells Tracy that him and Calvin will be sharing rooms, but Tracy is not happy with this. When they get into the hotel room, Tracy unpacks, and then goes out, but first, he shows Calvin how to use room service. Calvin can't believe that he can order anything he wants, but when he realizes that he can, he goes over the top, orders a load of junk food, and stuffs his face until feeling sick. Tracy comes back to the room with a girl, and finds his room in a mess, but the girl is concerned, and cleans him up, and they all go out together. Calvin and Tracy come back to the hotel to go to bed, and Calvin says that he's sorry for taking his girl. They say their prayers before going to bed, and Calvin asks Tracy if there's anyone he wants to bless, like parents or anything, but Tracy tells him his parents are gone. Calvin apologizes, and asks if he can sleep with the light on, as it's what he's used to in the orphanage. Seconds later, Calvin starts snoring. The next morning, Tracy is yawning from lack of sleep. Calvin drops him in it, and tells Coach that Tracy brought a girl round, and that they went out, and didn't get back until 1 o'clock in the morning. Coach Wagner tells Tracy off, and says if it happens again, he will get suspended. We then see Calvin and the Knights in the arena, warming up for the game. Calvin spots Iverson, one of the players from the opposite team, and walks over and asks him for his autograph. One of the players from the Knights comes over, picks up Calvin, and carries him away, back to their side. After a compilation of wins from Calvin, we see him back in the orphanage, snoring, and Murph wakes him up, asking what it's like to be famous. Whilst telling him how great it is, Ox wakes up, and starts eavesdropping. He then sneaks up, tries to grab Calvin's sneakers from his feet, and they all start fighting trying to stop him. Biddleman comes rushing in, and breaks it up. Ox tells Biddleman that it's his sneakers that's making him play so well, but Biddleman says if he lays one more hand on him, then he's sleeping in the basement. We then see Calvin playing a video game with one of the Knights players, and Tracy walks in saying he's going out to pick up some allergy medicine. Calvin asks to come along, but Tracy says no. The other Knights player tells Calvin it's not personal, and that he doesn't even see his own family. This shocks Calvin, because Tracy told him he doesn't have any parents, but the truth is, he still has a dad, but just doesn't see him. Tracy is then driving down the street, when Calvin pops up from the back seat, making him jump. Calvin asks Tracy why he lied about his parents, but Tracy doesn't want to talk about it. They pull up to the store, and Tracy walks in to pick up his order. And working behind the counter, is a lady who he seems attracted to. She selects his medication, and gives him instructions on when to take them, but he is too distracted by her looks, and doesn't listen to anything she is saying. He accidentally takes the wrong tablets, walks out, then gets back in his car yawning. Calvin is concerned because Tracy keeps falling asleep on the wheel. He soon completely falls asleep, so Calvin takes off his seatbelt, moves Tracy along to the passenger side, and hops in the driver's seat. He then starts recklessly driving back, smashing into loads of roadworks. We then see one of the Knights players telling Tracy that Calvin got suspended last night for joyriding, and that he did it to protect him. Tracy is confused, as he doesn't even remember falling asleep. The players then get on the plane home, and Tracy comes over to apologize to Calvin. We then see Calvin and Reg doing some homework, and Sister Teresa comes in and asks if he's prepared for the big test tomorrow. Murph then walks in upset, because loads of parents turned up to try and adopt Calvin. Calvin then realizes that Biddleman lied about the contract, so he goes to speak with him. Biddleman is already on the phone with Frank Bernard, complaining about all of the people there, because it was him who sent them there, as he thinks Calvin deserves a home. Calvin asks Biddleman why he lied to him, and Biddleman tells him that all of these other people are only interested in him because he is famous. He then agrees to help him get adopted, but brings his own candidates. We then see a few interviews with the parents and Calvin, but they are all cringy and he doesn't want any of them. Of course this was Biddleman's plan all along. Calvin then turns up at Tracy's house. Tracy asks what he's doing here, but Calvin ignores him, and lets himself in to look around. He says he just wants to check the place out. Tracy asks him again what he's doing there, so Calvin opens up, and tells him that his best friend Murph is mad at him. Biddleman lied to him, set up the worst parents meeting, and that he has a geometry test tomorrow. Tracy says that he's sure the right parents will show up for him. It's just a question of time, but in the meantime to call Murph. He also helps him with his geometry, by painting big examples on the side of his house. Calvin gets cheeky, and slaps a bit of paint on Tracy's window, so Tracy flicks some paint over Calvin's face and clothes. Calvin then picks up the whole bucket of paint, and throws it on Tracy. They then have a big paint fight. Murph turns up in a taxi, asks if he can learn geometry too, and then we see them all having another big paint fight. We then see some more compilations of Calvin and the LA Knights winning some basketball games, and Frank Bernard says that Tracy and Calvin really work together. Calvin, Reg, and Murph are in the playground in the orphanage, and Reg says that he should ask Tracy to adopt him, but Calvin says that Tracy isn't big on families, and that he doesn't even talk to his own dad. Calvin turns up at Tracy's the next day with a surprise, and he has brought Tracy's dad to see him. Tracy is not happy, and tells Calvin to get him out of there. This caused a bit of tension. Calvin arrives back at the orphanage, and a family from Bel Air is there, waiting to try and adopt him. We then see Tracy sitting down with his girl thinking about Calvin. Back at the orphanage, Biddleman stops Ox, and asks him if it's true about the power of Calvin's sneakers. He says yes, and walks inside. Biddleman then gives Calvin a pair of shoes to wear to meet the Boyd family, saying that he needs to give a good impression if he wants to get adopted. He gives in, and changes shoes. He gives Murph the special sneakers, and tells him to guard them with his life. Calvin leaves. Murph gets curious, and tries on the shoes, because he wants to see what it's like to be good at basketball. We then go into his imagination. He is in a basketball arena, runs up to the hoop, and scores with a slam dunk. Back to reality, he tries to slam dunk, the sneakers fall off his feet, and the ball misses the hoop. Ox and the bullies come in, and demand for Murph to tell him where the sneakers are. Biddleman then comes in and starts to burn a picture of Murph's mother with a lighter. Murph screams, and ends up giving in, telling them that the sneakers are in the attic. Meanwhile, Calvin is with the new family, eating at the dinner table, and he accidentally spills his drink on the table. We then see Biddleman meeting with some dodgy characters, and he asks to place a bet for $100,000, that the Knights are going to lose, because Calvin will have a bad game. Back at the dinner table with Calvin, they let him know that tomorrow they are going to finalize his adoption, and he will officially become part of the Boyd family. Tracy takes Calvin's advice, and meets up with his dad, and the next day, he comes to talk to Calvin in the back rooms. Before he gets the chance, Calvin's new potential parents walk in and introduce themselves. Tracy looks very shocked to hear that they are adopting him, and says that they are very lucky. Murph and Reg then phone Calvin to tell him about the sneakers, but neither of them want to be the bearer of bad news. Finally, Murph tells him. Calvin freaks out because the game starts in 20 minutes, and he runs out to meet with Murph. He jumps on a little vehicle to get back to the orphanage quicker, runs inside, and gathers his friends together. Biddleman sits down watching the game, in hopes that the Knights lose so that he can win his bet, while Calvin and his friends sneak up on him, and tie him up with sticky tape. They then start interrogating him, trying to make him give the combination to his safe. Ox walks in, and goes to untie Biddleman, but Calvin makes him change his mind by reminding him that Biddleman doesn't care about them. Ox turns against him, and starts unlocking the safe, as he knows the code. Once opened, he throws the sneakers to Calvin. They all run outside, hop on electric scooters, and zoom off towards the arena. Biddleman escapes the chair, grabs his phone, and rings the people he made the bets with so they can help to stop them getting to the arena. They all head out in their cars and start chasing the kids. While being chased, Calvin accidentally drops the sneakers. One of the men gets out of the car, and walks towards them, but Murph flies past on the scooter and picks them up before the man can grab them. Calvin then zooms into the arena, but just in the entrance, Biddleman is stood there blocking his way. Calvin smirks, revs the scooter, lets go of it, and it goes flying into Biddleman. Calvin finally makes it into the game, and the crowd starts cheering. The Knights were losing badly, but because of Calvin, they quickly catch up to only 1 point behind the opposition. Mid-game, Calvin trips over, and his sneakers split in half. He tells Tracy about only playing good because of the shoes, and that he's done for, but Tracy thinks he is joking around. They get him a new pair of sneakers to play with, and the game continues. Calvin's performance declines, so he tries a different approach, and instead of shooting, he passes the ball to Tracy. Tracy shoots and scores as the game ends, and they win the game. Calvin's new parents come in to congratulate him, but he says that he'll meet them in the car. He then goes over to the coach, and thanks him for everything. Calvin arrives back at the orphanage, as he turned down the Boyd family, and he goes into the playground to play basketball. Tracy then turns up, and surprises him, saying that he's there with the team, because the Knights are sponsoring the home now. Tracy also has another surprise. He wants to adopt Calvin, but Calvin feels bad for leaving Murph, so he asks if he can come along too. The three of them then go back to Tracy's, and the movie ends with a pillow fight before they go to bed. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a recap. Thanks for watching.